Welcome to this talk. This presentation is part of a larger program on building capacity in implementation science research and practice in low and middle income countries. This project is funded by a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health, which is part of the U.S. National Institutes of Health. These presentations on implementation science and measurement are specific to working in areas with few health resources. If you have more questions, you can find more information on our group's website, including more information specifically about this study. We hope you find this work useful.
Welcome to the webinar today on Dissemination and Implementation Research. My name is Laura Murray. I am on faculty at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in the Department of Mental Health. I'm a clinical psychologist by training and have been doing implementation studies since my postdoctoral years. From 2012 to 2014, I also participated in the National Institute of Mental Health Implementation Research Institute, or IRI. I cannot recommend this highly enough. I also work with the Applied Mental Health Research Group here at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which concentrates its work in low and middle income countries and has a number of ongoing implementation research studies. Today in this webinar, we will be giving you a broad overview of what dissemination and implementation research is. We are doing this as part of a National Institute of Mental Health U19 funded grant and hope that this will build wider capacity to better understand this type of research. So what is implementation science? I wanted to start simple and broad here to just ask what implementation science is all about. It's essentially moving evidence-based practices, programs, or strategies into routine use. Essentially, the science of implementing something. Here, this slide is a little more technical. These are some more formal definitions of what implementation science is. For example, the study of the process of implementing evidence-based programs or practices, or the study of methods to promote the translation from research to practice or policy. The two lower definitions you see here are more specific and provide insight into some of the variables this research looks into. For example, constructs such as adoption and uptake, and key people that we study, such as providers and stakeholders. So, for example, understanding the behaviors of providers or stakeholders in relation to adoption, or studying strategies used to adopt evidence-based practices. We will talk more about the details of different aspects of this as we go through today's webinar. So essentially, what implementation science is trying to do is get to the care that could be. Perhaps this is more efficient, reach more people, become more seamless, etc. One of the most important questions for implementation science is what care and quality gaps are of concern. We need to understand where these deficits are. I really like this quote because at its core, implementation science is all about making the right thing, the more efficient, accessible services, the easy thing to do. Implementation research is about better understanding how to make the system better and also easier to stick with and sustainable over time. On this slide, we wanted to lay out some example questions that implementation science tries to tackle. What is the effectiveness of an implementation approach or strategy? When we talk about an implementation approach or strategy, it's important to remember that this is not a treatment intervention. For example, we're not evaluating the effectiveness of a specific treatment for depression, but we're looking at an implementation intervention. So, for example, a strategy for provider training and supervision, or a learning collaborative approach. This slide highlights a few other example research questions in implementation science to give you more of a flavor of what one might investigate. So, for example, longitudinal study on the factors that contribute to sustainability of evidence-based practices. What is the relationship between context and local organizational capacity to adoption, implementation, or sustainability? Different studies look at de-implementation, studies of strategies to implement health promotion, prevention, early detection, etc. There are many different ways to look at implementation science. So now that we're understanding a bit about the questions implementation research might investigate, one might ask, what is the motivation for this type of research? Implementation research really is about improving care. It's about spreading effective practices to a population level. Essentially, we're trying to get a payoff on all this research we've done about what's effective. Looking at motivation again, I love a cartoon that we weren't able to include, but I wanted to describe it here with a few steps and pictures. We've all gone to trainings before, where we receive a lovely binder, usually large, that is full of great information, as the training was. Sadly, this is usually the end, and we return back to our places of work from a training with a binder. Knowledge that we don't put into practice, which is then forgotten. So the binder lives on, but the knowledge doesn't. We find this a lot in our work, that there are many one-off trainings with a lot of good information, but no implementation. So the information is forgotten or put on a shelf. Sadly, this means that a population never receives the goodness from the training. So you can have the best training, but in truth, it's when the rubber hits the road, as they say, that true challenges and successes come. Let's look at another reason to be motivated or excited by implementation research. Here is a picture showing what they call the 17-year odyssey, or the very long journey from when something that is researched or studied actually makes it into practice, when it really starts helping the wider population. Implementation research is really trying to shorten this so that research findings are more quickly moved into practice and helping people.